Welcome to the Next Gen Podcast. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Bryson Wright and Alex Winton. They got next, so let's get to the show.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Gen Podcast here on the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Bryson Wright, and I'm joined by my co-host, Alex Winton. We got a lot of stuff to get to today. Obviously, the Grizzlies losing their last couple games, losing to the Timberwolves in their last game, and then looking ahead today to them playing the Trail Blazers. As of the time we're recording this on Friday morning. And yeah, got an interesting game coming up. I mean, I guess you could call it an interesting game, but it's more like nobody. It doesn't seem like there's going to be many people playing in this game. So for the Trailblazers, DeAndre Ayton, Malcolm Brogdon, Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, Robert Williams, all out. For the Grizzlies, obviously we know no Ja Smart Clark. That's been all season, and then also no Jaren, no Conchar, no Luke Kennard, no Derrick Rose, and even Gigi Jackson is questionable. Now I do think Gigi will play. My thing for this game, I think they should just let Gigi Jackson and Anthony Simons play 1v1. Like let's just do that. I mean, I think that would probably be more fun, like at this point. But I mean, hey, we're gonna be locked in on this game. Hopefully, we can see some good stuff from Jordan Goodwin as well. I think he'll be back. I know he missed the last game because he's on a two-way, missing out on games and stuff. But yeah, it's gonna be an interesting game, mostly because it seems like both teams are just gonna be kind of throwing out whoever they have left when it comes to injuries and guys resting and stuff like that. And it's just gonna be one of those games. I always say the best games in the NBA are either between two teams that are at the top of the league or two teams that have a lot of guys out and you got a lot of guys that are kind of fighting for the next contract and stuff like that. I do think that usually does make for some good games, even if it isn't good in terms of the offense. Offensively it might be not be great, but in terms of like the effort and in terms of the competitiveness, it'll probably end up being a pretty close game down the stretch. And maybe get a chance for a guy like Gigi, who hopefully will play in some more clutch situations and stuff like that.
Yeah, this game's gonna be very, very funny. Depending on how you feel about these type of games. This is your classic two teams that are not gonna make the playoff game where everybody out. Young guys get a bunch of opportunity just to cook, as people like to say, let them cook. And that's what's probably gonna happen. It's gonna be a very funny game like that. Because I have no idea who's gonna start. I mean, obviously, I would think Jordan Goodwin's gonna start. He's got to play. I'm trying to think of who else is gonna play. You think Trey Jemison might play because we ain't seen him in a minute, and everybody's out. Jaren's out. I'm looking at the list now. Yeah, Jaren's out still. Contrar's gonna be probably out. Kennard's gonna be out. Like I think like I said, I think Gigi will play. So even if he doesn't start, he's gonna play like 35 minutes. Like because apparently from what it looked like a shoot around, he was participating and he looked fine. So I think he's going to play. He probably plays tonight, and maybe who knows? He might not play tomorrow. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, it's gonna be one of those games where you're kind of just looking like you really got to be a fan of these teams to watch these games, per se, because nobody's really a casual fan's not gonna watch that. Trust me, like I understand if you're not a fan of the Grizzlies or like people that I follow on Twitter, because I follow everybody else on NBA Twitter, like I wouldn't expect them to check this game out. I'm probably gonna be tweeting. I will be tweeting about the game, but no, I expect nobody else like that to watch this game because again, it's just about like you're gonna see a lot of. You might see a really good game, like competitive game, like you said, or you might see like a very sloppy game because a lot of these guys don't play a lot and they're out of place in terms of their position and roles. But at the same time, some of these guys have been out for extended periods of time. Like on our team, obviously Bane has been out for a while, Morant's been out for a while, Pippen. We're used to Rose being out, Smart's been out. So some of these guys are used to the opportunity. Like Vince Williams, I think he'll play, well. And then like on Portland, I mean, Shaden Sharp's been out for a minute. Robert Williams has been out for a minute. Ayton just got added to the list, but Malcolm Brogdon's been out. So like, I expect these guys to play. I don't expect it to be too sloppy. It'll probably still be in the mud because again, the Grizzlies are not a great offense, but their defense is pretty good still. I think it's like 10th or 11th still ranked, which is crazy considering how the season's going. And so yeah, so I do think it'll still be a good competitive game, but obviously, it could be very funny. Like I'm just expecting something funny to happen. Like I expect to just be laughing at at the basketball I'm going to be watching today. Let's just say that. Let's just say that.
Yeah, no, it could be a really crazy game. I mean, obviously, I think with everybody out, the best player on the court is probably going to be Anthony Simons for Portland, like I said, and he has had some pretty good games against the Grizzlies in the past. So that'll be one thing I'll be watching in terms of like how they try to guard him. Obviously, Vince Williams Jr. probably going to get that matchup. So that's something else that I do want to watch. Is I'm always excited to see Vince try to shut down the best player on the other team and stuff like that. So that'll be something good to watch. And then, like I said, continue to get GG more involved in the offense, especially because I know you wanted to talk a little bit about it today. I do think GG Jackson has an outside chance to be on an all-rookie team. The only thing that's going to hurt him is the games played because, I mean, obviously right now he's only played, I think, 26 games. The Grizzlies have 23 games left, so that would put him at 49 for the season. They put in a lot of those game requirements, the 65 game requirements for other stuff, but they waived that for all rookie because, rookies can sometimes be in and out of the lineup, kind of like how GG has. And I think they wanted to do it more based on how you played when you did play even if you didn't play the same number of games as some of the other rookies. And obviously, if you made it, he would most likely be second team all rookie. For me, like the first team all rookie, obviously it's going to be Wemby, it's going to be Chet, it's going to be Brandon Miller, it's going to be Jaquez Jr. from Miami. And then it's either going to be Scoot Henderson, Keontae George, or Brandon Bazemski. Like all of those guys, I think are going to be locked. Like those are the 8 guys I think are locked in. And then after that, you got a couple guys like Jordan Hawkins has a good shot, Derek Lively, and then I think GG is kind of in that same level. In terms of like points per game, GG is top 8 as a rookie. He's 8th right now, so that will put him as there's 5 guys on each team. That will put him as a top 10 rookie. So I think that's part of the reason. And then when you look at the way that he's kind of stepped into this role as the 6th man and has really had some great performances, like against the Bucks, against the Warriors, against some of the best players in the league. I do think all of that is important. Now, obviously, when it comes to like full body of work, it might be a little bit harder for him just because he's played less games. But I do think like if he had played the whole season, there'd be no question. Like there'd be no question that he would be at least second team all rookie this year. And I think that if he can kind of finish the season strong, he'll definitely have a chance at it. But like I said, it's just going to come down to what the voters think about the games played part of it more than anything. I think he's definitely produced at that level.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think again, that's the thing though about it in terms of the games played is that his circumstance was different than everybody else's. Not everybody, but most players. Because you gotta think I think if I'm not mistaken, if he did end up making the all rookie team, he's probably the lowest drafted one, or like the lowest drafted in terms of like or latest drafted, I should say. Like everybody else is like probably at worst mid first round. If I name him, like Pajimski was mid first. Obviously Miller was lottery, Chet lottery, Vic lottery. Trying to think of who else, but like all those names, Ken Whitmore first round, like all these names are like were first round prospects. Even though GG was a first round prospect, he fell to the second round. So that would kind of be the thing because he started out as a 2-way, he didn't have a contract yet, so his circumstances is different. So the games played is definitely going to hurt him. But again, I do think the production in these games, like especially if he keeps pace, will definitely put him in a conversation. Because again, you got to look at it. Because again, since the games played, well, I mean, it doesn't like he doesn't have to play 65. That helps. But again, if he can keep this type of production for the next however many games they got, like 20, however, like probably like 20, 23, somewhere around there, then I think he has a good chance of making it. Because again, I think he's averaging again 11 points, 44% from the field, 39 from 3, 4 rebounds. Like I think those are decent numbers. Basically, almost an assist a game too. So those are decent numbers. Like again, he'll definitely get consideration. Especially again because I expect, I wouldn't say they're gonna sit everybody, but obviously like today they're gonna have more rest days. So especially closer to the end of the year, especially after Jaren meets that 65 game threshold to possibly make all defensive team, he definitely probably will get more opportunity then because I expect Jaren to probably sit every other game, or they might quote unquote shut him down or whatever. Who knows? We'll figure out once they get there. But yeah, I think that that last stretch of games probably can give him the nod. I wouldn't be surprised if he did make it neither. I'm not counting on it, but for him to just even be in the conversation, considering how the season started for him and everybody versus everybody else that's probably going to presumably make the rookie team, is pretty good. So either way, we know as Grizzly fans what GG Jackson could be or what he has shown and stuff like that. So it'd be cool to have an accolade though for him, just personally. But again, as long as he's healthy and playing well, that's all I really care about, mainly. But I would like to see him on a rookie team just for agenda purposes. I like to push agendas on Twitter, so it'd be great to have that. To be like, oh, he made a rookie team as a second round pick, just cause just for bragging rights.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think it would change anything necessarily. Like you said, like Grizzlies fans know the type of player he is. But I think it'll be something cool for him, especially because with all the guys that have been out, obviously the last few years we've had people getting awards, making All NBA, making all defensive teams, all that kind of stuff. So it would be good to kind of keep that up. Hopefully he can get something. Uh, I know you talked about Jaren possibly making all defense. I do think he has a chance. It's probably going to be kind of difficult for him just because his numbers aren't as good as they were last year. Because he's playing kind of out of position. He's not playing the same. He's not playing with the same level of defenders around him either. Obviously, so that's been kind of an issue for him. But I mean, when you look at he already has 2 first team all defense, and he also has the DPOY last year. So people know the level of defender he is, and I think all defense does have a little bit of this that it takes more into account. It's not as much of what have you done for me lately as some of the other stuff is. Sometimes they do kind of give nods to guys that have been there before. But this year, Gobert and Wemby are definitely going to be all defensive teams in terms of like forward and center spots. But then after that, maybe they'll find another spot for him to be either first or second team all defense. We'll see. But he just doesn't have the same block numbers he had last year. I think the block numbers are what really helped him. His field goal percentage, defense and stuff uh, at the rim and in the paint, guys still shoot worse percentages against him than other players. So even if he's not getting as many blocks, obviously he's still a really good defender. But I feel like the block numbers last year was what really got him that. So it's going to be harder for him to make it. And like I said, with Gobert and Wemby both having really good seasons, I think they'll probably be ahead of him. But like I said, there's 5 spots for each one. We'll see if they put him kind of like that forward. Well, it's not even like positions as much anymore, but like in terms of if they'll put him on a team with Wemby or with Gobert as like a power forward, kind of, even though he has been playing center this year. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But right now, I'd say he probably won't make it. And if he does make it, it will more be because they know how good of a defender he has been in the past. And he still has, some stats to back it up, and he has been playing on a team that's missed out on so many guys. But like you said, there's still been like a top 10, 15 defense all season, despite that fact. And I feel like a lot of that has been because they've had Jaren, even though they have been missing a lot of people.
Yeah, that's really my case. That's why I keep saying. That's why I think he probably makes like the second team. Because again, you gotta win games too. So I do think while Wemby probably is on the, he does lead the league in blocks. I think a guy like Chet is for sure probably, I would say probably like almost say more of a lot. Probably is more of a lot just because his team's winning. They're like top 5 defensively, stuff like that. So that winning does play a part. But I do think again, like we talked about, or like you said, just when you have a reputation, like guys will make it off their rep alone. Like I've seen that before, where they make a defensive team and their team defense is not all the particularly, all the way great, but just because that player's so great, he'll make it. Like Jaren's block numbers are down, but like again, when you go look at the teams, if you look at like the team's top 10 defensively, I mean, they're going if Jaren gets left off, that means they're putting somebody new on there. Like they might put like I mean I'd have to go look at the numbers and everything, but like Denver's like top 10 defensively. So who they gonna put? They're gonna put Aaron Gordon on there. That's probably the only person I see. OG Anunoby was a guy that I thought would probably have a spot, but he's gonna miss too many games because he's that elbow injury he's had, or else he would have been a lot. So you start looking at these names or these teams, you're like, okay, well, who's gonna make it? And some of these guys don't meet the requirement, and if they don't meet the requirement, they don't have the same numbers. Because like, even though Jaren's block numbers are down, his defensive rating and his on and off numbers are still pretty solid. And again, they're still top 10 defensively and 11 defense, or top at worst top 12 defensively. And a lot of that's because of him. Like, still, even though he's not blocking as many shots, he's still a rim deterrent and not trying to drive on Jaren Jackson a lot. That's another reason why your block numbers do go down. It's not because of it's a lot that goes into it. Your defense around you is not as good, but also people are not challenging you as much just because they know how good of a shot block you are. That's going to happen to a lot of players. It's probably going to happen to Wemby and Chet to some extent. They're still going to block shots, but I would be surprised if they don't average like 3 blocks a game. Like it might go down to 2.5 or whatever, 2.2, whatever. That's yeah, I think he has an outside chance of making it, but I do think they're going to give him the chance to make it. That's why people keep talking about Jaren getting shut down. I'm like, they're not going to do that until he gets to 65 because there's an outside chance of making it. Like I said, if he does make it, it'd be second team, but I think he's on the bubble. Like it's not like a lock, obviously. I could see him not making it, but I don't think it's just ruled out. Like I think if Jaren, I would not be surprised either way if he's on there or not on there. But I think again, he's going to play the 65 games to give himself a chance. They're going to let him do that. Like they'll get that. Like I always surprised they get him to 65 and be like, okay, we're done playing you, quote unquote. We'll start seeing I think what they got him listed as quad soreness or whatever, quad contusion, whatever.
Yeah.
They got that little quad contusion, like it reminds me of his rookie year when he had that little thigh quad injury, whatever that quad injury was, and then they just listed him out. That's probably what they'll do after that 65th game. So, but yeah, I mean, again, I could I could see it going either way, but again, I will say this again, agendas. If he does make it, I will be pushing agendas. Even though, again, is it shameless? A little bit. I mean, I get it. Team was not that great. But again, I'll be like, okay, Jaren made another defensive team. The streak continues because I think he's made a defensive team it would be 3 years in a row or something like that. So, just for me personally, I would like to see it. But I'm not going to lose no sleep if it don't happen. Like, it is what it is. Because he'll be back there next year, hopefully. If everybody's healthy and stuff, he'll for sure be back there next year.
Yeah, for sure. I think if everybody's healthy next year, and obviously including him being healthy and hitting that 65 game requirement, and they have another center and he can move kind of back to his power forward role that he was playing, where he is kind of the roamer more than playing the 5, I think he'll get like I don't know if his numbers will ever be as like good in terms of blocks, like you were saying, because guys don't try him like they did a couple years ago. Like last season when he was averaging over 3 blocks a game, I don't know if he'll average 3 blocks a game again, but I think he's more of a 2.5 blocks a game guy than like I think right now he's at like 1.7, 1 point something like that. Like I think we will see it go up from that. And but like I said, this year it is gonna be hard. I mean, you got like I said, Wimby talking about Chet, Gobert, obviously Anthony Davis is always in the conversation when it comes to stuff like that, and he's been having a really good season. And for the first time, it's crazy how they added that 65 game requirement, and it's like Anthony Davis is actually probably gonna hit it. Like he's been really healthy after having a lot of health issues the last couple years. So it looks like he'll have a chance to make it too. So like you said, he's kind of on that bubble. We'll see what happens in terms of who all actually hits that 65 game requirement as well. Because nobody's hit it yet. You never know what could happen in the next couple weeks in terms of people sitting out, people getting hurt. So we'll see what happens if there's something like that brings it into question on who's going to make it. But I think as of now, I'd agree he's firmly on the bubble, has a chance, but probably isn't like in terms of like a national standpoint. I think people are going to lean probably more towards Wemby, Chet, like the guys like that. Uh, mostly Gobert, AD, and Chet, just because those guys are all on teams. Well, mostly Chet and Gobert. I mean, the Lakers are kind of low, but all teams that are expected to at least be in the postseason conversation. You know what I mean? And then with Wemby, I mean, I know this is a Grizzlies podcast. I don't want to get into too much on it. But when you talk about a dude that has come into the league and had the utmost, like, that the highest expectations, like his expectations were you are supposed to be the best prospect we've ever seen. And he's met those expectations. And for a lot of people, he's exceeded the expectations they had for him as a rookie. Because for me, as a rookie, I wasn't expecting him. I was like, okay, he might average 20, but I was like, I probably see him more of like 17, 18, something like that. Nah, he might average 22, 23, like straight up, like by the time the season's over, because he's over 20 right now and he's playing his best ball. So it's like, and then on defense, he might be the best defender in the world right now. Like I'm just gonna be honest. So he's definitely gonna make it, despite the fact that his team is bad. The fact that the Spurs have even won, I think they've won 12 games. If they didn't have Wemby on the team, they probably would have won like 3 or 4, dude. Like they might be like a 3 or 4 win team if they didn't have Wemby this season. So like I don't even want to talk about the win loss thing. So I think those guys will have a better case than him. So that's the only reason why I'm not 100% sure. But I did want to move on from that conversation because I had to get to something I saw a lot of people kind of talking about yesterday, which was Xavier Tillman going on the Gilbert Arenas podcast and kind of talking about some of the difference between the Celtics and the Grizzlies. And the first thing I saw was I saw a lot of people I saw the reactions to it before I watched it. And so I saw people kind of being like, X was taking shots at the Grizzlies. He said this, he said that. And then I watched it and I was like, I didn't like me personally. I didn't think he said nothing that was wrong. I mean, he basically said the Grizzlies when he was playing, we were just young and turt, whereas the Celtics are more like we're clocking in, we're doing this, we're doing that. Which I mean, I don't think he said that it was a worse thing. I think he said it was different, right? And is that not what a lot of people were talking about this whole offseason and why the Grizzlies needed to get veterans was because they needed more of those older guys. Like they got Al Horford, they got Kristaps Porzingis, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are in year 7, year 8, like in the league. So it's like these are older guys. These are guys like they got kids and like wives and like families. They go golfing on the weekends. Like it's just like a different team. And that's what X was also saying. It's like X was like the oldest dude, like one of the older dudes on the team. And he's like 26. He's like the third oldest dude on the team. So to me, I didn't really see it as like he's taking shots at the Grizzlies. I think he just sees it as like there's a big difference. And I mean, it's a clear difference. I mean, if you watch the Celtics versus you watch the Grizzlies the last couple of years, it's a clear difference in terms of how they approach the game. Obviously probably Celtics are more like business like, whereas the Grizzlies are more like we're going out, we're having fun. Obviously, both teams won a lot of games when they were at their fullest and stuff like that. The only thing I saw some people also getting a little bit mad about the fact that he said it took the Grizzlies everything they had, including health, to get there, whereas he felt like the Celtics have more in the tank. I think, like, in my opinion, what he's saying is that the Grizzlies were playing at their best in the regular season, and then when they got to the playoffs, they didn't necessarily have another gear to shift into. Like, that's kind of what I saw, right? And I think if you look like the last couple seasons, I think that could be. I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily incorrect. Like, I mean, if you look at the way they played in that Timberwolves series and in that Warrior series, obviously I think they had some good games, but I don't think they like hit another gear. Now I think Ja Morant hit another gear. I think Desmond Bain might have hit another gear, but I don't think the team as a whole hit like another gear when they got to the postseason. And I think that's kind of what I was getting from what X was saying. And then like that was really the only stuff that really involved the Grizzlies. They talked about a bunch of other stuff. Like they were talking about cards for like 15 minutes, it felt like. So they were talking about all other kinds of stuff. But yeah, I didn't really have an issue with anything X said. And I think that I mean obviously they traded him to a good situation and everything, and I'm glad he's enjoying being on the Celtics. But you also look at it. I saw this tweet from Fast Break Breakfast, of course. Shout out my guy. But talking about how X and Roddy both move into these new teams and are kind of not they don't get playing time because that's the kind of players that they really are. Like, not to say that they can't help a team at all, but it's like both of these guys are into the bench guys and they were playing a lot of minutes. And so he's also going into a role that I think suits him a lot better. And I think that is part of the reason why, if you see him being a little bit happy, like he's happier to be for the Celtics, because I mean, dude, he's basically gonna sit the bench and probably go to the finals. Like, let's be honest. So he's in a great situation.
Yeah. I had to laugh when I saw it, when I actually watched it with context, because he said nothing wrong. Again, people in their feelings, and I get it. I'm just being very honest. People in their feelings, because again, you know, people leave, and then I want to say it's Dylan PTSD, but Dylan left, and he started talking about the Grizzlies. I was a scapegoat, blah blah blah. So I feel like some of that plays a part, PTSD. But when you actually listen, he didn't say anything wrong. I think a lot of what he's saying is simply put, the Grizzlies are young and talented, and while Boston they got more vets, and while Tatum and Brown and all them around the same age, they've been making the playoffs since they've been an NBA player. They haven't missed the playoff postseason not once, not once. They made a conference finals their first year, so they've been in these situations. The Grizzlies haven't. Where it's different when you're 25, 26-year-old guys have been to the NBA finals a couple times, or been in the conference finals a couple times, where the Grizzlies have only won one playoff series with your best three players only being in the playoffs or being like stars for like 1-2 playoffs like that. You know what I mean? Like, you got to really think about that. So I think that's really the difference there. It's like, like X is a different player. Like, he's in a different role. He's a guy that's where he's supposed to be more of a third, fourth string guy and not playing a lot of minutes. That too. But again, where he's talking about another year, I just simply think it's a talent thing. Boston has been a better team than the Grizzlies the last 3-4 years. That's not a bad statement. It's not a bold statement. Boston been one of the best teams in the league for the last 3 or 4 years. They haven't won it, but they've been consistently one of the teams that make the conference finals every year. Like, they haven't missed a conference final since, I think it was like 2020 or 2021, whatever. I think it was the year the Bucks won and the Nets played, and that was the only year they won. They didn't make it, and because that team was not great, and then on top of that, Brown missed the playoffs. So outside of that, they've been basically a conference finals every year. Like, they're just a more talented team. That's why I think I understand what he's saying, because they can get to another gear. Yeah, they get to another gear because that team they've been in and out the lineup, but yeah, they can get to another gear because they've shown to get to another gear. The Grizzlies, where they've gotten to another gear per se, yeah, I think he's saying like they had to play very well to get to the number 2 seed, because of all the circumstances where they had more injuries. Because again, like he even said, the injuries that Boston really had that many injuries. Grizzlies had a lot of injuries the last couple of years, so he clearly stated that. It wasn't like people were saying he said they were immature. He didn't say they were immature at all. There's nothing in there that said that the Grizzlies were immature. When you really listen to it, he's just simply saying it's a different situation. Like, and it is. We're a younger team. We're one of the youngest teams in the league still. Your best players are 24, or the oldest 25, and not a lot of them. None of them been to a conference finals, let alone NBA finals. It's going to be a much different team versus a team that's been there, done that. And not only that, if we compare franchises, no disrespect to the Grizzlies, I love the Grizzlies, but like Boston's a historic franchise. They're used to that. That's why they carry themselves like that. That's the standard there. The Grizzlies are still establishing that standard there, here, I should say. So it's going to be different. So yeah, I don't think X said anything crazy. Like, it's not that really big of a deal in my opinion. I don't think, like, we saw what Dylan Brooks said. If we're gonna have anything problem with somebody saying something, it should be what Dylan Brooks said. I mean, we already talked about it before, but like that's the real like slick stuff was what Dylan Brooks was saying. I've been saying like I'm the scapegoat and they did this and blah blah blah. I want to beat them every time. X didn't say that. X was like, hey, look, like, still like I'm still my guys and all that. Like, it's just a different situation. He's literally saying it how it is. Can't be mad when somebody says it how it is. I understand it. Listen, it's a bad season. It happens, but like, we're not always gonna be down like this. I mean, we'll be right back up there, and that's what the Grizzlies are trying to get to. Even Ja said in the past before, I think when he did that, like I'm fine in the West interview, he said we got to go through the Celtics. Like that's what he felt like. So they're kind of one of the standard teams that he probably even sees like, hey, we got to beat those guys. Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't really have a problem with what he said. I don't think anybody else should, but again, I get it if you do. It might be dealing PTSD. That might just, could be that, but who knows, man. But yeah, shout out to X, man. I ain't really mad at what he said. Hope he continues to just do what he do there. Like you said, he might. I think he'll play maybe depending on the matchup, possibly. But like for the most part, he can just be ready for his number called and not watch the Celtics really, which I expect them to make a run. So he at least is gonna see a couple rounds of playoff basketball. So yeah, shout out to X, man. I ain't got no problem with what he said.
Yeah, and he did preface a lot of what he said was talking about this season in particular. I mean, he said they got hit with the injury bug crazier than he's ever seen, which is like obviously that's the truth too. I mean, when you're missing all those guys, you're obviously going to lose games. I think that was part of it too. Was he was kind of talking, and I think that's where some people may have seen him taking a shot is when he was talking about like, oh, the Celtics, we're up here, we never lose. Like it feels like we never lose, and it's like, yeah, like he said that, but he also prefaced that by saying, on the Grizzlies, we got hit by a crazy injury bug, and that's why we were losing games. So like I didn't see anything that he said as something where he was trying to take shots at the Grizzlies. If anything, I think he was trying to hype up his new team, which is what I would expect you to do when you get traded somewhere. Like that's what you need to do. And yeah, like you said, I wish him the best of luck and everything when he goes to Boston. Hopefully he will be very successful there. Maybe he'll get some minutes in the playoffs, stuff like that. But I had to move on to one of the last things we wanted to talk about this week was Nic Claxton did come through Memphis, was very friendly with Ja Morant's family. Obviously, if you didn't know this, Nic Claxton and Ja Morant did play AAU basketball together in South Carolina. Their families know each other and stuff like that. So he knew a lot of the people that were in the section from South Carolina. Got to meet up with them. He was even asked about possibly, teaming up with Ja, and he said kind of like, we'll see, stuff like that. And then we also had Ja briefly briefly retweet the lineup that NBA Central posted that was Ja Smart, Bane, Jaren, and Nic Claxton. Uh, I think in terms of Nic Claxton, the player, I think he would fit with the Grizzlies. Obviously, I've been saying they needed another center and a guy that can be a legit like 10 rebounds a night guy, which is what Nic Claxton has been this season, averaging a double double. And then defensively, I mean, he was in the defensive player of the year conversation with Jaren last season. So I think that he will help a lot. Um, he doesn't bring obviously as much on offense as Jaren does, but you're not asking for that, right? Because you already have Jaren. So you don't necessarily need a ton of offense. I mean, when you look at Steven Adams' numbers, I mean, Steven Adams wasn't going out there averaging 15 a game either, but he was good in his role. Now, he's not the rebounder that Steven Adams is, but I think he's still good enough and he's better than what the Grizzlies have now. The only question for me is going to be how much money he's going to want and whether or not it's going to have to be like kind of a sign and trade kind of thing, and if the Grizzlies will have to give up assets or not to try to get him. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how it works because I'm pretty sure he's a restricted free agent, so the Grizzlies can try to go after him and stuff like that. But they might have to deal with the Nets a little bit, maybe do a sign and trade kind of thing to make the money work and everything like that. But that'll be the main question for me would be when it comes to contracts and what exactly would they give up for him. Like I don't know if I necessarily want to give up that lottery pick that's about to be coming up this year to get Nic Claxton because I think you should be able to get him, even if it is a sign and trade with a player and maybe some picks, like some second round pick or a first down the line. I'd rather give up one of those than give up this one coming up this year. But if they do give up a first round pick, I'd like to see it be a first round pick, maybe 2025, 2026, like something like that, something down the line, rather than giving up the one this year, because you would assume that if you are back to even obviously every year you're going to have injuries, but even if like not to this level, because even if it's only okay, Ja, Jaren, Bane probably gonna miss some games, but if they're somewhat healthy most of the season, you're not gonna be in the lottery next year, right? Like if they have regular health, if they all play 65 plus games next year, let's say that, right? That still gives them each a chance to miss like 17 games. If they all play that many games, I do not see the Grizzlies being anywhere near the lottery. So that first round pick that you can give up now that's down the line would probably be a later first round pick rather than giving up the one this year. So I'd like to see him maybe package some players and some seconds if possible, maybe a future first, but I don't know if I'd take that first this year to get Nic Claxton.
Yeah. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, he is a unrestricted free agent, which is why I think the hype around, or not hype, but like the discussion around him so big because he can basically go anywhere he wants to. That's really because usually I thought that too when he was I think last year when they talking about him being free, I thought he was restricted all the time. But then I actually looked at it, I said, oh wait, he is unrestricted. So it is a big thing because I think even NBA University, shout out to them, talked about it because he's one of the more bigger unrestricted free agents we kind of seen in the market in a minute, just because you usually don't see somebody that young in the unrestricted free agent market. Usually they're restricted. So, and I think that helps the Grizzlies if they were to get him because again, it's all about leverage. And if he wants to go to Memphis, then like you don't have like again, like I think even shout out to Parker Fleming, shout out to Marco. I think they've both been saying it. They don't have to give their lottery pick to get Claxton. I don't think they would have to do that. Like, and if they would do that because again, I will tell you this now, like with how they talked about with Smart, obviously this is all assumption, but like with Smart, I remember them talking about like we had a list of guys that we wanted, and he was one of the guys that like was like on the if everything goes right. I'm pretty sure they got a similar list for the center position. I'm pretty sure they got a similar list, or they're gonna work out a similar list, and hopefully it's some of the names I like. But for example, let's say if they can't get Claxton, okay, they can just try to go get Isaiah Hartenstein who fits just as good, or Mitchell Robinson. Like they got names. Claxton again for me again. I with all the bigs that I keep naming or talking about, one of being Claxton, they bring a different dynamic, right? No disrespect to Steven Adams, but like thing is, he was more of a like I said, like a rebounder, screen setter, which is cool and all, but you need more one that's like a modern guy. Like, and what I mean by that is mobile, or they offer something offensively that you don't have. Like they offer a different dynamic. Like if for example, I back in before Gaffer got traded, I said Gaffer was good because he could be a lob threat. That's the same thing Claxton is. A lob threat, athletic, can guard multiple positions, can switch. That's the type of dynamic that you need next to Jaren, or could like brings you an offer you a different dynamic. Because even though Steven Adams was good, he wasn't a switchable big. No disrespect to Steven Adams, he wasn't scoring a lot, but he wasn't a lob threat big. I mean, he could catch lobs, but like if you throw Claxton in the dunker spot. Like he's a vertical threat. You have to pay attention to him. Like if you're coming off a pick and roll with him, with Ja and Claxton, you gotta your low man has to come down. They have to respect that, which is going to open up a shooter. No disrespect for Adams. They probably brought him down a little bit, but they didn't have to dig as deep down or be as help oriented because of Adams wasn't much a threat. The same for Hardenstein and guys I mentioned, or like a guy like Wendell Carter, who's not a big lob threat, but he can stretch the floor. So they all bring different dynamics. And for Claxton in particular, I think his switchability, um, his again his vertical threat, like I think that brings a lot to the team. Because again, you get a lob threat, you get a guy who's 6'11", who's young, and he can actually I won't say playmate, but he can make the right read, so they could use him in the spots that they usually use bigs in this system. So yeah, he makes sense, but again, like you said, it all comes down to the money. Because again, I think the Nets are probably gonna pay him a lot, so that's probably why I don't think he's a real option, just because I don't see it. But if he doesn't want, but if he wants to take less money, hey, cool, he could come here. But again, it's really gonna be about the money, because again, I don't, I think with the Grizzlies getting that gets into the second apron and all the other stuff. For me, I always said the Grizzlies are going to have to spend anyway. You can't be a team that's talking about winning a championship and not spend. Your payroll's got to be at least top 10, 15 at worst. Like that's usually how it goes. Like you can't be a team that doesn't spend. Like you're not going to win being cheap. That just doesn't happen. But again, you don't want to spend all your money. You want to spend smartly. You don't want to just spend it on one guy. So I get it. So I feel like they want to allocate their money a different way or in different ways. But yeah, I mean, if Claxton's available and they can get him, sure, get him. I don't think they have to give a lottery pick. Like they probably can give 2027 lottery protected seconds, get rid of some of the salary that matches, like Zaire and some other guys, and get it done. Like I don't think it'll take too much. And if it's not, then they'll move on. Like I don't think they're gonna over tip their hand because they understand there's a lot of options out there. Not crazy amount of options, but I don't think people understand how good these players are. Or like I won't say all these centers, but the center market doesn't need to be as big as because like your center, you need a center, but because you have Jaren, it's not much of a dire need. I understand people have their qualms about Jaren, but like the center spot would be different if you didn't have a big man at all. But the fact that you already have a starting caliber big, not only a starting caliber big, but also level big, your need for a center, you don't need one of the top end elite centers. Like you get Isaiah Hartenstein, who's shown to be a starter level center, and I promise you this team gonna look different. I promise you. If you could get Isaiah Hartenstein, I promise you this team gonna look different. I can almost guarantee you. Because he was starting for the Knicks, and his numbers were comparable. If you go look at his numbers as a starter, they're comparable to Adams. And that we seen what happened when we had Steven Adams as a starting center on this team. You know what I mean? So like again, they got a lot of options. Claxton would be great. Obviously, that Ja connection is cool. Like that's the real cool part about it. So he might consider it, but again, I'm not like counting on it. Just because I think ultimately I think the Nets gonna pay him. I think they're gonna pay him. They're gonna overpay. And I get it. You know, they want to keep a young talent in there. They want to build around Mikal, whatever. That's they plan, whatever. So they probably gonna overpay him. But if not, listen, Grizz could swoop in and get him somehow, some way. They make it happen. But I think he probably stays. But it is funny just to see it because that was a funny retweet just to see on the time. Oh, I didn't see the retweet, but I saw the picture of it. It was pretty funny. So I was like, okay. So Ja obviously sees the stuff too. So yeah, I bet Ja's probably talking to him about it. Ja's probably doing some
man,
yeah,
I hope he
Ja's
was
probably
talking to him about it after the game. I hope right
Yeah.
after the game he was talking to him
Yeah.
about it. Because I mean, even if it doesn't end up happening, I think it's still good that they have like they're having the right conversations and that, you know, John knows it too. Like John knows what their needs are and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think it was good. And like you said, since he is unrestricted, actually, that does change things a little bit. I still think, I mean, like Dylan was unrestricted, and we still signed and traded him this past offseason. We see unrestricted guys still have to sign and trade too, so I think that still could be a possibility. Just because, also on the Grizzlies side of it, they might be trying to just move some money as well to try to avoid being in the second apron. Uh, but another thing, like you said, talking about the payroll stuff. I think that for the Grizzlies to be the best that they can be, they're gonna be probably at least a first apron team, right? If not a second apron team when it comes to that level, because they're gonna be paying a lot of guys, but they also have the bird rights to a lot of guys, meaning they can go over the cap to you know, re-sign some of these players if they would like to. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple guys that you can see, like you talked about, with like Zaire and Jake and stuff like that, that might get thrown into something like that in order to make the money work. Just because, like with the emergence of Vince and Gigi and even Lamar Stevens, like even having Lamar Stevens come in and play the way that he has played, I think it does make it less likely that you see mostly Jake. I think Zaire probably still has a chance to be on the roster just because he has shown promise these last couple weeks, and I think that he like with Zaire is just interesting because his main issue is just inconsistency. We've seen him multiple times, and throughout the season, we've seen him play like a high tier role player or even better. Like I mean, he had 27 against the Bucks, right? Whereas we've seen that from Zaire. We haven't even really seen the flashes of that from Jake as much as we have from Z. So I think Z is still firmly ahead of Jake in terms of like who would be off the team, and they still have Zaire for like one more season too. So we'll see exactly what happens with that. But I think talking about adding Nic Claxton, you talked about the switchability. I think I mean, we saw how good the defense got when it was Jaren and Bismack Biyombo as the front court. Now you're taking Bismack Biyombo, and instead you're adding another dude who's been all defense, has been in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation, and the interior defense will be insane. You got two bigs that are switchable in the pick and roll, stuff like that. Both are great rim protectors, and then Claxton being a better rebounder, and hopefully Jaren can continue to be better as a rebounder. He started off the season solid, like rebounding pretty well. And I think he did do better when Biyombo was out there too. But since he's moved to the 5, it has kind of gone down. He did just have his career high against the Timberwolves when he had 13 boards against them, though. So that was a positive. But I still think that having another center out there with him, I think not only will it help the team in terms of getting boards when it comes to adding a guy like Claxton or even a guy like Hartenstein, but I also think he'll be a better rebounder when he has more help. He because it seems like sometimes if he does box out his guy, there's another big man down there with him too that he can't get the board over to. So it's one of those things where I feel like if they have a center next to him, he'll just be better in all aspects. And if they have a center like Nic Claxton next to him, I mean the team would be crazy. Like that's a really good starting 5. And then you can talk about whether like Vince coming off the bench, Gigi coming off the bench, probably Kennard coming off the bench if he's still on the roster next year, Brandon Clark, and it's like, dude, that's a really good team if you can figure out a way to make that work. But I do agree. I think the Nets will try to pay him, and I think and if the Nets pay him as like and see him as a core piece, then the Grizzlies aren't going to be able to outpay that because I don't see them trying to sign him to like a 5-year, 100 million, like something crazy like that, or like 4-year, 90 million, or something like that. I don't see them trying to sign him to anything like that. So if he gets offered like a really high contract from the Nets, I'd probably assume that he'd stay there. But it's still something that I think the Grizzlies should keep an eye on, especially because like with the Ja Morant connection, I think that could be good. Having somebody that he's comfortable with, somebody who he's played with growing up, I think that could be a good thing just on both sides.
Yeah. I don't think people understand with the center situation, and the thing is the options. Like I said, a lot of these guys are not over the top, but they're competent. We saw what happens when you just have at least competent players on this team. Like Vince Williams and Gigi Jackson, they haven't been like all-star players. They've just been competent. And look how they changed the dynamic of or how their players look versus what we had at the beginning of the season where you had, no disrespect, but David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, those guys playing, Zaire Williams playing. And then when they came in the lineup and started playing with some competence and doing all this little stuff that changed the whole team, or just having like a competent center. Like when you saw that, all that, or like when guys played at the level, it looked different. So these guys again will, can add something. Again, Claxton is just a fun conversation just because again, people talk about like, guys not wanting to play in Memphis, blah blah blah, quote unquote, but it'd be funny just because, that'd be a real big free agent signing. Um, if that were to happen. But again, it's hard for me to see it. Again, I gotta see it to believe it. A lot of this stuff is always cool to talk about, just have the conversation about. But for me, I care about the substance. Like for me, it's like, yeah, it's possible, but like if you really look at it, it's probably not a thing. I focus more on the people that are realistic to me. Where you look at, like I said, like a situation like the Knicks, you got Isaiah Hartenstein, who, like I said, who I that's probably the top guy for me to get. Because again, it's like, he wants to probably be the starter now. He played very well as a starter, but clearly Mitchell Robinson's the starter. So they're not going to pay 2 starting centers that much money, especially when you already got to pay OG and Anobi. It's just the business part of it. Look at the numbers. They're not going to pay him 15 million. You're already paying OG and or Mitch Robinson 13, 14 million, and you got to pay OG probably a max. Not only that, you got to pay some other people too. So they're not going to pay somebody's going to be out. If Mitch Robinson or Isaiah Hartenstein, one of those guys could be a guy that the Grizzlies target, or both. Who knows? But I'm not saying they're gonna get both. But either one, whoever stays, one's gonna go. Grizzlies can swoop in and get him, or another team where they got to pick, where depending on where they pick falls, they could trade back with a team and get a center that way. Do a pick swap, get a player back, and keep a draft pick, and so you get a starting center, and then you get another pick in this draft, or not another pick, but the pick is a little bit lower, but you still add another young guy on a rookie contract, like stuff like that. So they got a lot of options. So it wouldn't be the end all be all. So I don't want people to focus on Claxton just per se. It's fun to have the conversation. It's fun to talk about. But again, if they don't get them, they'll be like, oh man, the sky is falling. Like, please, like I promise you, there's 3 or 4 options out there that probably they'll have. Again, it's just about how much they're willing to pay. at the end of the day. They could get Claxton, but it's about like how much. Like if he wants to come here, cool. But it's how much they're willing to pay if they had to do a signing trade. Are they willing to pay like 2 firsts or a lottery pick? That's something they got to figure out. That's not for me to figure out. I'm not in the front office.
Yeah. Well,
So-
and then also when it comes to the Nets too, we know the Nets are always going to ask for a lot. I mean, they asked for like 5 first-round picks from Mikal
Man.
Bridges, and I
Yeah,
think turned
man.
down 4. I think they
Yeah, it's
turned
like
down
4 or
4
5.
first-round picks, and
Yeah,
I'm
it's like
like,
4 or 5, man.
so if
They
it
be
gets to,
wildin' anyway.
if they start doing something like that, like you said, we'll move on, man. There's other options out there.
They'll hang up the phone for sure. They'll hang up
Yeah,
the phone.
no question about that. But as always, I want to thank everybody who listened to this week's episode of the Next Gen Podcast here on the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. As always, I was joined by my co-host Alex Winton. I'm your host Bryson Wright, and we will see y'all on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Gen Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like and a comment wherever you download your podcasts. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co, where you will find comprehensive coverage of all things Memphis sports and how you can become an insider. We'll see you back here next time.